the moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
All right, so let's talk Muppets.
Yeah, let's talk Muppets.
Let's go.
Hey, everybody, it's days away from Christmas as we record this, and hopefully
That's
as
true.
you listen to this.
Sorry.
It could be
No,
it could be
maybe.
2021 you're listening to this, 2022. Hey, a lot of our Christmas episodes still get lots of listens in December.
If you're
even
listening to this
though-
in 2021, congratulations, you made it through 2020.
Yes, I wish I was in December 2021 at this point.
We're just jumping right to Mandalorian season 3 now.
Yes, we are. Yes, we
Okay.
are. But no, before we get there,
gotta
we
get
are
to our
talking
Christmas.
about, this is our last in a series of Christmas episodes.
Yes.
The last of our 2 5-bucket list episodes. Last week was Nightmare Before Christmas. And Christina, if you would like to share your thoughts on Nightmare Before Christmas right now, we're still in the festive mood. So if you had anything that we did not cover that you'd like to
Or
talk
that we got wrong.
that we got wrong.
I did see Nightmare Before Christmas in the theater with my.
Ooh, so you're young.
Yeah, I was a freshman in college.
It's not like she was 6 years older.
I know. I flashed back.
I wasn't that young.
Oh.
I was young with my college boyfriend and his roommate. We went to see it, and I loved it. Like from the start, I just was very attached to this movie. Jim talked a little bit about merchandise last week. I have merchandise, Nightmare Before Christmas merchandise in every room of my house. And I have stuff from the original release.
I was going to ask if that, because you were working in a video store at the time? Bookstore?
I was working in a bookstore, yeah.
Okay. Because that's pretty much all where you found that.
One of the things I have is like from that original era is actually a little lock, shock, and barrel in their tub. And it's a wind up.
Yeah. Oh,
And it moves. Oh my gosh. Like I'm looking around my house. I have so
did
much
they
stuff.
Did they have McDonald's toys?
I don't remember if they
I
had
don't know if they did or
McDonald's
not.
toys or not. But I have so many things. I have a Nightmare for Christmas clock. I have a Nightmare for Christmas cookie jar. I have an ice bucket. There are more Nightmare for Christmas ornaments on my tree than any other kind of ornament.
See, we needed you last week.
I have a billion stuffies. I have the Jack in the Coffin. I have the pirate Jack from James and the Giant Peach.
What?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
That's cool.
And
they made him.
yes. And I mean, I have so much stuff I can't even list it all. I have a Jack dress that I wear at conventions. Like it looks like Jack's outfit, except it's, a dress.
So do I.
I just have so much stuff. And in fact, when my husband and I went to Disney World in 1999, this was back when Hollywood Studios was still like a working studio and they would have like displays of props and stuff.
Yep.
They were doing a Nightmare Before Christmas exhibit at the time. And you guys were talking about the Jack heads with the pop-offs.
Yeah.
There was a case full of them.
Get out of here. Oh,
yes.
That's so cool to see.
And I have videotape that we took like walking through the exhibit, looking at all the stuff. Yeah, it was amazing.
That's cool.
I am a huge fan of this movie. I always have been. I was very sad to miss the discussion.
Yeah, that was a missed. You were missed.
But she's here this week.
Yes.
We are talking about the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yes, we are talking about the Muppet Christmas Carol, and I don't know if you guys saw this in the theaters or
No, and this
No.
was a surprise to me because as I was researching, I've seen it before, 1 or 2 times before. I didn't see it in the theater. I had to check myself because immediately when you brought this up, that we were going to cover this, I went to, in my head, the John Denver version of the Muppets Christmas, which was not a Christmas Carol.
No, that's right, because you're like, oh, it should be a quick episode. It's only like a half an hour.
And yeah, John Denver, Scrooge. Okay, I know this. But then I brought it up on Disney Plus, right? Because I'd seen the little box for it. And then as I brought it up, oh yeah, it's Michael Caine. It's not John Denver at all. Then I looked it up and I was like, it's theatrical. This totally escaped me. I've only known it since after its theatrical run. But obviously, Christina, you were familiar with it right from the start.
Yeah, and I did, again, see this in the theater. Part of that's because I love the Muppets, but also part of it is because I love A Christmas Carol. But this is a film that I watched this so many times, I could probably recite it to you.
It is very rewatchable. I can honestly say I've seen it on VHS over once or twice, but I did not see it in the theater. And by and large, I don't remember much of it, even though I'm a huge Muppets fan.
But it is A Christmas Carol, and there's so many iterations of A Christmas Carol.
Correct.
This being probably in the top of the list of recognizable versions of this story. But I'm thinking of Mickey's Christmas Carol, the Disney's other attempt with Jim Carrey as Scrooge.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think is the only version I've never seen.
No. I've heard good things. I remember watching it, but it didn't leave a lasting impression on me.
I saw the preview and I don't know. I guess I just thought he was making such a goof of that character. Like in the preview, you just see him like bellowing as he's carried through the sky. And I'm like, that's just not Scrooge.
Right. You know what's funny is that I've seen that version a few times. And the preview, I think they really searched for those moments.
Those Jim Carrey moments.
The wacky Jim Carrey. But it's actually a pretty frightening version, especially for a little kid.
This one's a little dark.
I traumatized my son because I hadn't seen it until I watched it with my son a few years ago when he was younger. I'm thinking, Christmas Carol, how bad can it be? It's always pretty benign, even the versions I've seen, even of the Ghost of Christmas Future. But this was pretty frightening, and it was on the dark side. So I do think that those trailers, which I've seen, kind of paint a different picture of what it is. But still, if you don't like Jim Carrey, then I don't think you'd be able to get over that fact.
And that was also the Polar Express CG kind of weird,
kind of dead eyes, kind of animation, which only added to the creepy factor of it.
Yeah. So, but we're not talking about that movie. We're not talking about the Muppets.
Well, I only bring it up because I've watched so many versions of A Christmas Carol. The Goodman Theater in Chicago does a version of it every year. It's like a Christmas tradition. We've seen it 3 times with our son. I've watched many, many versions of it on film over the years. My father's personal favorite was the George C. Scott version. If you've never seen that, you should find it and watch it because it's quite good. Obviously, I've seen Mickey Christmas Carol multiple times, but this I've watched it twice already since Christmas or since Thanksgiving. There's so many things that make this movie great to me. The number one thing that I love, because I am in my heart a book nerd, is there's a lot of fidelity actually not only to the story but to Dickens' actual language. And you hear it throughout the film, especially in Gonzo's narration.
That's right. That's the brilliance of this.
Because he's Dickens
and Gonzo.
He's playing Dickens.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I really, really like. So they keep some of those little sort of Muppety meta things, the little asides, but otherwise they try to stay fairly close to the story and they play it straight. And Michael Caine is actually the reason why he really sells this movie.
Well, he said when he came on board that he was going to play this like a Royal Shakespearean acting troupe. He was not going to wink at the audience that he's surrounded by Muppets. He was going to play it straight. And that's exactly what he does. Because otherwise, the minute he does that, it takes it. That's why again, not really seeing this in a long time, the brilliance of having Gonzo and Rizzo act as Charles Dickens and walking you through the story. They're the ones who get the pratfalls. They're the ones who get, you know, kind of the funny asides and the comments. You know, even once or twice he breaks character and he calls him Gonzo as opposed to Charles Dickens. No, I'm Charles Dickens.
I think one of the great things about this as well is that obviously this is marketed to kids. The Muppets' involvement are just then and now are going to cause a lot of kids to watch this. So Gonzo as Dickens opens up this literary world.
Yeah, and he's
kids.
He's, you know,
and at the end he says, if you like this, read the book.
You're right, correct. Yeah.
And by the way, my son read this book the story, it's like a novella length, when he was 11. So, and it was at least partially because of Muppet Christmas Carol. Sure. It does so many things that I like. It doesn't shy away, I think, from the darkness of the story.
There is some dark elements to this. And at one point, I think Rizzo even says, do you think this is too scary for the kids?
Oh, yeah, no, that's one of my favorite scenes. He says, this is scary stuff. Should we be worried about the kids in the audience? And Gonzo says, no, it's all right. This is culture.
It's culture.
Yeah.
But at one point, even they're like, we'll see at the finale. This is getting too much.
Right. So, but this is what came out in 92.
Or 93, somewhere around
92, December 11th.
Is it 92? Okay.
92.
Yeah, and so you have to put this in context that this was, you know, 2 years after Jim Henson passed away.
Right.
You know, and it opens with In Loving Memory. This was the first Muppet movie made without him, directed by his son Brian, who it was his directorial debut. And so you have, what's his name? Steve Whitmore stepped in and took over Kermit. You know, you still got Frank Oz, you know, playing some of these characters, but yeah, to not have Jim Henson involved in this in any way, shape, or form.
And it has, I think, a lot of the Muppet spirit, you know.
Yeah, I love the fact that, you know, right off the bat, you get the opening credits and it's, you know, it's Kermit as, you know, the character. It is Miss Piggy as they didn't, you know, they're not, these characters are real to them in their world, and they are just playing Bob Cratchit and whatnot.
And again, like, that's one of the things I think that makes this movie great, is that it's not just a Muppet movie. It is a Christmas Carol, you know, and they don't try to like deviate or make it something different than what it is.
Right.
Paul Williams did the songs, and I think that Paul Williams is such an appropriate choice, not just because he had done the Muppet movie.
Yeah.
And he also wrote songs in Emmett Otter, by the way. Emmett Otter's
Which we haven't covered yet. How can we not have that covered?
Well, yeah, it's something to look forward to next year.
There you go.
He does write songs that are catchy, but I think of him ultimately as a very sentimental songwriter. I feel like his lyrics are very sentimental. And actually, speaking of Emmett Otter, he's at his most sentimental in Emmett Otter. If you can't get through Emmett Otter without crying, you are not human.
It's because of those songs. And Paul Williams is so recognizable a songwriter as well. Yeah. He's very unique. He's got his own style.
And I think that his songs are appropriate because Dickens himself is actually ultimately a very sentimental writer. He can be very, very clever. He can be very funny. He can write stuff that's very dark. But ultimately, a lot of his stories have like a very sentimental core. The character of Tiny Tim is one of the most emotionally manipulative characters in literature.
There's no better Muppet to play him than Robin.
Yes.
Because if you've ever watched The Muppet Show, Robin always is brought on for that emotional heft to whatever sketch that he's in. It's like, if they don't have Robin playing Tiny Tim, then they've done something seriously wrong.
So I just think that Paul Williams, as a songwriter, is sort of a good emotional match for Charles Dickens' style of writing. And the songs in this, some of them are just okay, but some of them are great. Especially the opening song where Scrooge is introduced, I think is fantastic.
Was it Mr. Humbug? Mr. Humbug song?
And the song my son loves, can literally sing along to and will sing along to, is the Marley song.
Oh, the genius. See, that's where they take, because Jacob Marley was only one person in the book, right? But they brought in Waldorf and Statler as the Marleys, and it's the second song that comes up, right? And they just set the tone because they are such lovable characters. And he's like, oh, it's good to be heckling again. And he's like, oh, it's good to be doing anything again.
They are still funny, but again, they don't sort of shy away from that darkness. They have the scene, it's like, it's so darkly comic, but he says, oh, remember when we kicked the orphans out and they were shivering with their little frozen teddy bears, and it's like, oh my gosh, these guys are so mean. Like, they kicked kids out of the snow.
But they're reveling with Scrooge before they remember what they're there to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't mention that the film is not only dedicated to Jim Henson, but also to Richard Hunt,
who
did the voice for many of the Muppets, but also Statler. So
they did them together. He did Scooter exclusively as well.
So
you're not in this movie at all.
Who is not in this movie?
Yeah,
amazingly.
Yeah,
I just don't think that there is like an appropriate place for him. They did a nice job of working in my personal favorite Muppet, Beaker.
Yes. My wife started to laugh. He didn't even have to say anything.
No, correct.
Not that he says anything. It's just a me. But as soon as he appears, she starts to laugh.
They have a song on the soundtrack that's not in the movie.
They do. There's a couple of songs on the soundtrack
Bunsen Honeydew
that don't appear in the film, and I think it's this happens a little later, but there's a scene that's famously cut out. When Love Is
I had
Gone.
to look it up. I just watched it on YouTube this morning.
So I had the VHS version of this for years, and that song was on it.
Right.
And I always thought that the action really stops dead when that song comes on.
I can imagine that.
It feels very long. And I think that if you were a kid, you'd be like, when is this going to end? And I never really liked that song. In fact, on the VHS, sometimes I would fast forward through it.
Oh, wow.
And because it just seems like it takes a long time. And it's not a great song.
No, and I think it tips his hand a little too early that he gets weepy on his first trip into the past.
Oh, no. That happens in the story. The original story.
Where he's crying, singing.
He starts to cry. He starts to cry.
No, I know, but when she's singing and he starts singing with her.
Yeah.
I think.
No, that doesn't tip his hand. That's part of the story.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because I always used to think that by the time he makes it to the second ghost, I'm like, he's already changed. He doesn't
right. That's
okay. Get the other two ghosts.
Yeah, no. In the original story, he actually weeps on seeing his self at the school. All alone.
Right.
And then he starts to think about the boy who was standing outside the door, and he says, "Oh, I should have given him something." The boy who was right. In this case, it's Bean Bunny.
And immediately I thought of the 3D Muppet movie in Hollywood Studios.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. Like it's the little rabbit from the 3D movie.
I don't remember him.
And actually, just speaking of Bean Bunny, again, where this movie just doesn't really shy away from the darkness of the story, there is a little 2-3 second scene where you see Bean Bunny shivering in the cold.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
the camera just kind of pans.
Newspapers.
Yeah.
So it really does
acknowledge
the hardship that he's suffering and that a lot of people were suffering.
But even Tiny Tim, he's coughing. You've always seen him on his little crutches or whatever, but in here, he's he got emphysema, he's got pneumonia.
Well, he could have any number of things.
No, I know, but I'm just, it's, to me, it was like, you've watched this before and Tiny Tim is ill, right. But here he's coughing.
And that not having medical care, right? And not having the money for medical care is going to make the difference.
Like you said, they're not shying away from that stuff.
And that's in the original story too, again, because even though Dickens was a sentimental writer, he also saw the hardship around him and had experienced it himself as a child. He went to work in a workhouse when he was young because his father was in debtor's prison. And so I do think it's nice that the story, even though it's for kids, acknowledges the dark parts of the story, which you need, otherwise you can't believe in Scrooge's transformation.
Right.
I think it's really important to see that stuff. And I think that, because I did look up some stuff about this last night, and there were some critiques of the film that it was too dark, which is like,
well, I think the
story is dark.
It's dark,
so...
right? But
is this the first time you are hearing of the
Right.
Christmas Carol story?
But again, there's other iterations that kind of gloss over that a little bit. They're not, leaning into the darkness.
But I mean, unless it's like the Barney's version of A Christmas Carol.
Right. Well, Mickey. I mean, Mickey's Christmas.
No, Mickey's is pretty dark too at the end.
Yeah.
They don't shy away in that.
I agree. I think that Mickey's Christmas Carol does, it's Mickey's Christmas Carol is quite trimmed down in terms of the story.
Yeah, what is it, like 20, 25 minutes?
Yeah, it's short. Yeah. But they do sort of lean into the darker elements. But, I think it's ridiculous when people think that kids don't get or should be shielded from stuff that's dark. One of the reasons I think why Roald Dahl was such a popular author is because he never tried to tell kids that the world was okay all the time.
Right. Yeah.
That is fundamentally at the heart of so many of his stories. In Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, there's a chapter called The Family Begins to Starve. I mean, he was not pretending that everything was okay, right? Or in James and the Giant Peach, Aunt Spiker and Aunt Sponge are terrible to James, shockingly terrible. And his parents died in this horrific accident. He never pretended that everything was okay. And I think that kids know the world is not all lollipops and roses all the time. And I think that it's important that when you have a story like this, that you don't pretend that everything's okay, that Scrooge isn't really that bad. He is that bad. That's why he needs to have 3 ghosts come and visit him.
Yeah. All right. We can't just have one.
And I love the line at the beginning before he starts to get visited. And they tell him that he's going to get visited by 3 ghosts. Can I meet them all at once and just get it over with? They all come at the same time.
And again, that's the language is slightly altered, but that's what he says in the story. And that's one of the things that I love is just, again, how much of the story that they preserved. They preserved one of my favorite lines. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. There's some lines that actually work their way into some of the songs. Not necessarily a line, but certainly a sentiment that works its way into the first song about Scrooge. So in the book, Dickens has this great line where he says that Scrooge carries his own low temperature about with him, which I think is such a great way of saying that he was a cold person.
Yeah. Did he also write "It's Fozziwig's Rubber Chicken Factory"? Because how did Kane pull that line off without laughing is beyond me.
But in this first song, they start off by talking about the cold wind blowing, right, that chills you to the bone. And that's because Scrooge is coming, because he carries his own low temperature about with him, right? He's he literally spreads coldness before him. Yeah, that scene where there's so many, this is where you get those really fun asides with Gonzo and Rizzo. The scene right before they go to the chicken factory and he's like, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat.
Or I love the line talking about Scrooge's coldness in the beginning when the whole theme of them being in his office and working in the freezing cold and he doesn't want to put another coal in. Our assets are frozen.
What's funny, you mentioned the darkness to the kids in the audience, and I guess when they were doing advanced screenings, the kids didn't understand why he was giving his workers coal. Because obviously Santa leaves you coal when you're bad, no, that's what they use to heat them. So,
because
we didn't think that one through.
That's a great scene too, when they ask for, and they're so cold, and he's like, how would the bookkeepers like to be unemployed? And they're like, heat wave. When Cratchit tells Scrooge that it's customary to give people the day off, and he's like, and they're like, oh no, that was the frog's idea.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But he manages to talk him into it, saying, well, nobody else is going to be open. You're just going to be wasting heat if you.
Yeah. So where did he buy that turkey from?
Yeah.
Because the shop is still open. Because something that people don't realize is that a lot of people didn't actually have the capability necessarily to cook something like a big turkey in their house. So a lot of times the shops would cook them for them, and
that was a raw turkey, by the way. That was a 20-pound raw turkey at 20 minutes a pound. That you're talking like 4.5 hours easily.
But we haven't talked about any of the ghosts yet.
No, I'm impressed with this that they didn't go with established Muppet characters.
They were going to. They were.
I
were
did
going
read
to.
That at one point they were going to start pulling them, and I like this so much better because they are their own entities.
Yeah, they're not. They're bringing no preconceptions to the roles. So it's not like you're getting, it's Fozzie as the ghost.
Correct.
Of
right.
Christmas
I think
past,
that would have
right?
taken it away a little bit.
One of the things they do by not having the established characters is keep to that sense that Michael Caine is bringing to the film, that they're playing it straight.
Right.
Yes, there's like funny stuff, again, like little asides with Gonzo and Rizzo.
Yeah, no, they are the comic relief, and I think that's the brilliance of this movie is that exactly what you're saying, that the core of the story itself is intact and they are playing it straight.
And I do think it's nice that they do that. And of course the Ghost of Christmas Present is I think a very charming kind of puppet for kids, because he's so clearly a Santa analog.
Yeah, especially at the end when he starts changing his hair color and whatnot.
Right. Now wasn't the Ghost of Christmas Present in Mickey's Christmas Carol the giant from Jack and the
Yes.
I think it was. Yeah.
And that was very reminiscent
like of
that character from that previous version. But I also love the Dark Crystal-esque look to the
that creepy,
Ghost of Christmas Past.
Girl doll. Yeah.
I think we talked about this past, like funny things that scare your kids. My son, for years, no matter what version of Christmas Carol we watched, was always scared of the door knocker. The Marley door knocker.
Into his face, yeah.
Even when it was goofy?
Even when it was goofy.
Listen, you're going to give me an inanimate object that friggin' turns into something.
It was so funny because he was never bothered by the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, who's in every rendition is always incredibly Reaper-like.
Yeah.
Never bothered him. Like all the other elements of the story never bothered him, even when he was little. But the door knocker always freaked him out. And even now, when we watch any version of it, he's always like, "Remember when the door knocker used to scare me?"
It doesn't anymore. I'm going to excuse myself for a minute, but I'll be back.
You know how when you get these things in your family where you quote things at each other? The line that I think we quote all the time is the scene when Gonzo picks up Rizzo and uses him to clean the
window.
Yeah, yes.
And Rizzo says, "Thank you for making me a part of this."
Right.
And it's one of those things that we use all the time, like if we just want, be like, "Do you want to do something?" Or be like, "Do you want to be a part of this?" But yeah, I love this movie. I love again, like sort of the fidelity to the story, to Charles Dickens' language. I think Michael Caine is great in this. Like I said, he's not messing around. He's giving it, turning in like a real emotional performance so that you really feel the impact at the end of the story.
But so do the Muppet performers as well.
Yeah.
That scene with the reveal that Tiny Tim has died. It packs a very powerful blow emotionally. And that's a testament to the Muppeteers that are doing the voices and doing the puppetry.
Yeah.
And again, they preserve the language of the story where he says, life is made of meetings and partings. That's direct from the story. And it's just like if you can't, if you can watch Emma Otter and not cry, if you can get through that scene without a tear in your eye, I don't think you're human. It's such a heartbreaking scene. And again, this goes back to Dickens himself. He and his wife had lost a child. They had many children. I can't remember offhand exactly how many, but I'm pretty sure it was more than 7. But they had lost a child, and the genuine grief of a parent losing a child is in that scene.
In it, yeah. Speaking of children, wouldn't a frog and a pig have like hybrid? Like, why are the girls just all pigs and the boys a frog?
That would have been, I would have liked to seen girl frogs.
Or a hybrid, something in between. Fozzie wigs. Was that straight up the Muppet Show backstage?
That I thought that as well. I thought that
Right?
that's looks too much like the backstage,
Backstage
area
of the
to
Muppet
not be
Show.
purposeful.
Right. Yeah. So, but we did get Dr. Teeth, and we got Janice and the Swedish Chef. Yes. So does this make up for Michael Caine's Jaws 4 appearance?
I don't know.
Yeah. You never saw that either?
No, I've seen that. It's pretty unforgivable.
It is. That was a paycheck.
The whole movie is unforgivable.
Hey, Michael
when
Caine
when the shark comes up and screams, that's my favorite part of the
Michael
whole
Caine is indelible. I think was forgiven that like the day that it came out. So I'm willing to give him that for a paycheck. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. You know what else I thought was cool? And this is just a stupid throwback to our Sleepy Hollow episode, which was there was a shot where they were panning across the window and they had the little marker, the window. Remember we talked about the maker's mark?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, they even went to the extent. So I thought that was kind of neat. Yeah, I enjoyed it immensely. I thought it was very well put together. I don't remember 3/4 of this, but
yeah, this is one of those things. You know how sometimes you'll turn on something while you're doing something else just because you like it, and you want to listen to it. This is one of those movies that I do that with.
In the trailer, they used the soundtrack to Beetlejuice, so I don't really know how that plays out.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, that's what they did back in the day. They just pulled something from the library.
Right.
So
those Paul Williams songs weren't ready to go.
Right.
So Disney had high hopes for this back in the winter of 1992. It did make its money back. It cost $12 million to make, and it made back $27 million, but it wasn't as big of a hit as they expected it to be. But if you look at what was in the marketplace, it was going head-to-head against Home Alone 2
yeah.
and Aladdin. So
two big powerhouses.
It was two Disney movies going against each other. So it lost that three-way battle. I think this has gained a lot of fans over the years, generation after generation, because you cannot avoid a Christmas Carol, some iteration of it,
right,
during the holidays. And this is one of the best that you can see. A lot of critics didn't take to it at the time. And like I said, I think time has been kind to it. But the Chicago Tribune, this seems very mean-spirited. I read a review. Seems likely to bore children and adults in equal measure. Like,
wow.
Wow.
That's amazing. I mean, like I said, it is still very fundamentally a Christmas Carol. They don't change the major points of the story. So if you're criticizing this story is boring,
story itself, right? Yeah, go back to the source.
Like you're criticizing Dickens, and I think that you might want to reconsider that.
Right. In contrast to that, years later, Screen Rant, a work of genius on every level, and that was followed up with the greatest Christmas movie ever made. So this ranks very high on a lot of people's Christmas lists.
Yep. It definitely, like I said, definitely ranks high on mine.
Yeah.
It's not Christmas without Muppet Christmas Carol.
I have newfound respect for it. Listen, Drew Struzan did the poster art, and you can't fall in love with it just from that. Then move along, I guess.
So who's your favorite Muppet character?
In general or from this?
Yeah, just in general.
I would say I was always partial to Beaker.
Mm-hmm.
The Swedish Chef as well.
Burgundy.
But I think as an adult, looking back on the Muppet Show, my favorite character has become Sam the Eagle. He cracks me up every single time.
That's Frank Oz, who also has a song that was cut. It's on the soundtrack. Yeah, because he's so stoic. He's always like, listen, it'll be a shock to you, but Fozzie Bear is waka waka.
I feel not shocked by that.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I'm not traveling too far outside my lane. But Kermit the Frog, I have such a soft spot for all these characters. The Muppet movie is probably one of the first soundtrack albums I ever owned, unabashedly as a kid, because it is a kiddie movie or whatnot. But I'll sing along at the top of my voice, and I love the Muppets. So, who's yours?
Beaker is always my favorite. Beaker's still, just like with Aaron, if I see Beaker, I start laughing. Like, just something about him. I actually have a great t-shirt that I got years ago that has Bunsen Honeydew and Beaker next to each other, and Beaker's got like a weird contraption on his head, and it says friendship equals trust. Because, Beaker was always the butt of Honeydew's experiments.
Sure, yeah. He was always getting blown up.
But after Beaker, it's Gonzo. Because Again, I just think the weirdo
Gonzo.
in me is attracted to the weirdo.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Gonzo.
Gonzo.
Yeah.
And for my money, Gonzo sings the best song in the Muppet movie also. Again, sort
Agreed.
of that unabashed Paul
Yep.
Williams sentimentality. I'm going to go back there someday.
In doing some research on this, Brian Henson, like I said, this was his first movie out of the gate, so pretty impressive. But he has this message that he said about his father. He said, "My dad's message was that we should respect others for how they're different from us, not how they're similar. He appreciated eccentrics and dreamers. That's what his characters are."
Mm-hmm.
I think that still resonates. I think Disney has had a hard time trying to find the right vehicle for these characters. They've owned them for quite a few years now. And they've at least 2 shows. They did one on ABC that was kind of a The Office type of a take, which I don't think went very well. The 2 movie reboots with Jason Segel. The first one I thought I really liked it a lot.
I did too.
It had a lot of heart to it.
Because it really showed his love of the original Muppet Show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it pleased old fans and kids at the same time.
Yeah. But like seeing, an old rattled Luke Skywalker seeing a deflated Kermit the Frog was not a fun thing to see. But, let's get the band back together. Kind of a
I don't know if you guys have watched The Muppets Now on Disney.
I have not. It's on Disney.
Little short.
Yeah.
They are fantastic.
Are they good? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not that long. I mean, I think they're less than 10 minutes long. But they are so good that, they were releasing them week to week, just like they did with the Mandalorian episodes. And when one came up, my son was like, "We got to watch the new Muppets Now is out.
Okay.
We got to watch it." They were.
How are the voices? Because I know there's been a lot of turnover, and I think Whitmore was let go.
They do a fairly good job. Yeah. I mean, at this point, tough, that like, some characters, like Rolf, is so much Jim Henson's voice.
Correct. Yeah.
It's really, to me, it's just really hard to duplicate that. Yeah. But I think they do a fairly good job. But more than anything, they retain the core elements of the Muppet characters, but put them in a modern setting. And that's the key thing, is like to keep who those characters are, not to change who they are, but to keep, and it, we think of the Muppet Show very sentimentally because we watched it when we were kids, but it's some aspects of it, it's a very cynical show. I mean, there's some like very sharp humor, I think, in the original Muppet Show that maybe we didn't get when we were kids.
Oh, you're right. You're right. And just the mean-spiritedness, even though it's so funny, of Statler and Waldorf themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Like some of the things they say to Fozzie is like unforgivable.
Well, you know what? They were a precursor to trolls on Facebook. Social media. They set the precedent.
But they hated everybody.
But they were the funniest part
they
of the
did
whole
hate
show,
everybody,
right?
but they saved the most slinging barbs for Fozzie.
Yeah. And
so
did they even make a joke in this movie about save the jokes for the bear or something like that? Wasn't there a comment? So
I think that some people might be like, "Oh, well, Muppets Now, it's not quote unquote nice," but the original Muppet Show wasn't necessarily nice. So if you haven't watched it, Muppets Now, it's quite good. It's worth your time. We laughed.
Cool. Maybe that's what I'll do today.
So Christina, would you like to officially induct the Muppet Christmas Carol?
I certainly would like to officially induct the Muppets Christmas Carol into the 5 Bucket Club.
There you have it. One more to the list.
Yeah,
one more.
Worthy. Definitely worthy. This is it, huh? This is the end of our Christmas specials.
I missed 2 of the 3.
Missed 2. Oh, debate. Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween or Christmas movie?
So I have always watched it Thanksgiving Day. So I split the difference. Obviously it has a very strong Halloween element, but it is half a Christmas movie.
Way to be committed. Nice.
Yeah.
And everyone tells me I'm wishy-washy.
It's a half a Christmas movie.
There you go. Well, let's see if only you walk through that turkey door.
Before Christmas.
That's true.
So
Yes.
And you guys were talking about the book last week. I have the book too.
There you go.
I have the picture book. I'm telling you, I have so much Nightmare Before Christmas stuff in my house. I literally cannot look anywhere without seeing it.
So with that, Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
We survived 2020, kids.
Yep. And we'll see you in 2021.
2021.
Yes.
Are we taking a well-deserved holiday break?
We are.
We are. We have 150 plus episodes, so you can go back and listen to one of those. And then write us a 5-star review. So, all right. Thank you very much for being with us this year. And we'll see you next year.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIConfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you. Thank you for making me a part of this.
Matt!
Yes.